Okay, delegates, welcome back to Mon Academy. So far in this course, we've covered what Parley Pro is, we've covered caucuses, and we've talked about introductions and yields, which are kind of the base aspects of Parley Pro you use in essentially any speech. Now we're going to talk about the spicy stuff. We're going to talk about those things which aren't often used, but which are still core to parliamentary procedure. And those are points and motions. In later videos, we're going to go over each of these in turn, but right now we're going to talk about these in general. So, points versus motions. What's the difference? I think a good way to think about it is that points interrupt the flow of committee, while points shift or redirect the flow of committee. So what does that mean? If you've been in conference before, you'll probably have heard a point before, and what that is it's not part of a speaker's list. It's not something you say when you're recognized. You literally get up to say it. You interrupt the flow. You get up and you say point of information. And in some cases, you can even interrupt someone's speech with a point. So, again, you are intruding inside the flow of committee. While motions, you can only make a motion if you've been recognized to speak, if you're on the speaker's list, and then you can do something accordingly. So on the point of points, no pun intended. Well, maybe pun intended. Why should you be allowed to interrupt a speech, right? Like, isn't the whole idea of Parley Pro to establish stability and order within a debate setting? Well, as you can imagine, if you're allowed to interrupt with a point, it has to be for a pretty good reason. And so because of this, there are 5 main points, which we will go over in the next video, but they tend to be about something immediately relevant, like asking a question or clarification. So, as 2 examples, there's the point of personal privilege, which is what you say if there's something intruding your ability to participate. So, for example, if you can't hear the speaker, so that there you can interrupt, right? Because if you can't hear the speaker, saying something at the end of the speech is not useful. And then there's things like point of information, which you can't interrupt their speech, but you can interject after the speech is over, which is if they've said something which you believe is incorrect. So again, that's something which is immediately relevant. Then there are motions, and first we can go over the types, because I think that helps better illustrate what motions are. So the first one we've already covered in the last video. These are yields. So you have to, a motion, you're shifting or redirecting the flow of committee because you are shifting your time, right? You're yielding time to the author's summation. You're yielding time to the chair. You're yielding time to a fellow delegate. Or you're asking questions. So you are, again, thinking about the theoretical basis of a motion. You are changing the normal course of events in debate. Then there are procedural motions. And procedural motions, as you can expect, are about the procedure, the actual how the debate is carried out. So this is often if you want to change parliamentary procedure through something like a suspension of the rules, or also things like ending the debate of some sort, in some sort of fashion. Then there are substantive motions. So these are of substance. So rather than being about procedure, they're about the things which are actually being debated. That's a way to think about it. So these consist of amendments and resolutions. So if you're motioning to move into resolution debate in moderated caucus, you're doing something of substance. And if you're motioning to hear an amendment, you're doing something of substance as well. So again, we will go over what these motions are specifically in a later video. But a thing to note in the beginning is that there's a limit on the number of motions you can make in a speech. 2. So you can you introduce yourself. Say you ask, will the author yield to a series of questions? That's 1. That's 1 motion right there. I reserve my right to speak thereafter. That's a second one, because you're asserting your right to speak thereafter. That's another shift of the flow of debate. So that's your maximum. Also, just as a note, yielding time to your chair doesn't count to this. So you technically have 3 motions, but 2 motions is the most effective way of thinking about it, because you're going to yield to someone at the end, at some point. So, whether that be the summation or the chair. But if you count the yielding at the end, then you can ask the author to yield to a series of questions. That's 1. You can reserve the right to speak thereafter, and you can thank the chair. That's 3. You can't ask the author a series of questions, reserve the right to speak thereafter, and then reserve the right to yield time to a fellow delegate. And that's weird, right? Because it's a yield. But the way to think about it is that at the end of their speech, they'd be yielding to the chair anyway. So it's kind of 3 motions as a whole. As another example, you can't motion to hear an amendment, and motion to end debate, and then if that fails, if both of those fail, you can't then motion to yield time to fellow delegates. So again, it's a maximum of 2 motions in a speech. So these are points and motions. I hope this was clarifying as to the theoretical basis of what these things are. In this next video, we're going to go over the points individually.